You're listening to Seminary Dropout, episode 46, and I'm your host, Shane Blackshear. This week on the show, I'm going to give away a bunch of free stuff, and then I'll talk with the authors of Slow Church, C. Christopher Smith and John Pattison. All this and more on Seminary Dropout. Let's go. Welcome to Seminary Dropout, friends. Let's get right to it. I need to give away a Ragamuffin DVD. Most of you know I interviewed David Schultz, who was the director for Ragamuffin, the Rich Mullins biopic, and I had a giveaway to give someone a DVD. I had an extra copy, so I wanted to give it away. I'm here to announce the winner. The winner is Amy Keith. Amy, congratulations. If you're listening, send me an email so that I can get your address so I can send this DVD to you. Congratulations. Now, I need to give some other stuff away. I've been pumping this survey for a while, and we had a really good turnout, and I want to thank you so much, all who took time to fill out that survey. And I'm especially thankful because, you know, I did have this incentive that I was going to give away 3 T-shirts to 3 people who filled out the survey, and I'm about to pick those people now. But I have a feeling that most people, although you'll take the T-shirt, you filled out the survey because you cared about the show, and so that means so much to me. And I'll go over just a little bit of information that I gleaned from that survey. But right now, I'm going to pick live the 3 people who are going to get a Seminary Dropout T-shirt. I've got our family's ubiquitous red mixing bowl in front of me, and in there are small sheets of paper that have everyone's name on it who filled out a survey. So I'm going to draw 3 out of there right now. This is live. So exciting. And the first one is Jake Walsh. Jake Walsh, congratulations. If you're out there, please email me and give me an address where I can send this T-shirt and give me the size that you want. I believe I've got small through extra large left. So send me an email, let me know. And you didn't give me other information besides your name, so I'm hoping that you hear that, hear this, and I'll also post the winners on the show notes for this show. So Jake, congratulations. Shoot me an email. All right, next up, reaching in, and it is Janice Samuelson. Janice Samuelson, congratulations, you win. Also, no contact information there. So Janice, I hope you're out there. Send me an email with your T-shirt size. All right, last one, and it is Renee Goodwin. Renee Goodwin, and once again, no contact information. I should have been more clear to begin with. It's my fault that I need to contact you. But at least I've got a name. I can track you guys down somehow. So there it is. Jake Walsh, Janice Samuelson, and Renee Goodwin. All 3, please shoot me an email, and I will mail you a Seminary Dropout shirt. So all those, sorry for those if you didn't win. Thank you for filling out that survey. It meant so much. So let's talk a little bit about what we learned from the survey. And I'm not going to go over everything, but just the stuff that basically that I could measure. So for the questions where you had to type in an answer, I won't go over that because obviously everyone's answer was different. But I do want to talk about some of the stuff that I was able to graph. So one of the questions I asked was, should the interview segments be shorter, longer, or about the same? So the overwhelming majority, over 85%, said that they should be the same. So that's good. That's good to know. 10%, a little over 10%, said that it should be longer, and only 4% said that it should be shorter. So I think based on that, I'm going to keep them about the same. So that was really good to know. So let's go down here. The gender question. I really wanted to know what the makeup was of Seminary Dropout listeners. So we have about a little over 76% are male, and a little over 23% are female. So I would like to see that be more equal. And so I think there are a few things that I've always tried to do for Seminary Dropout to be a place where that would be interesting to to women. And so I want to kind of beef up those efforts to try to make that happen. And so if you have any ideas, let me know. I think the obvious thing is to have more female guests. And I always want to do that. And so I'm going to be working doubly hard for that. That's all that to say that. So the last thing, or one of the last things that I want to talk about is the question of what category what age group are you in? That was one of the questions. I was kind of surprised. I thought it was going to skew younger than it did, but I'm perfectly glad. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. The highest age group to be represented was the 30 to 39 range. I really thought I'd have more 20s, but the 21 through 29 age range was second most represented, but just barely. So, I myself am 31. Had to think about that. I have a birthday coming up, so it's not going to be 31 for long, but 31. And so my age range is most represented, so that kind of makes sense. Behind that so I'll only go percentages. People in their 30s, a little over 34%. After that is people in their 20s, a little over 26%. And, you know what? Right now, this is interesting. The group in the 20s and 40s are tied. So it's first people in their 30s, most represented, and then people in their 20s and 40s next are completely tied. So it's an equal group, actually. So that's really fascinating. And then after that, let's see, we've got people in their 50s, a little over 8%. And then on the extremes of the extremes, that's going to sound so bad. We've got one survey person who filled out the survey who's 60 or older and one who is 17 or younger. I'm so thankful. No one, this is strange. Well, not that strange. 18 to 20 was a category. Why the survey is set up to only include 3 years of someone's life, I don't know. But no one in that age range. So that was fascinating to know. How did you hear about Seminary Dropout? Most people from Twitter. The second group is, the group that heard from a friend and the group that said other, and they have comments attached to explain what that means. And most others were Stitcher, actually. So those of you listening to Stitcher, welcome. So glad to have you. Twitter, and then from a friend and other. And then after that, iTunes, after that, Facebook, and then just a few, actually just one found out from my website. So you came to my website first and then found it. All right. After that, I asked, have you subscribed to Seminary Dropout? 75% had in iTunes, and I would encourage you to do that, obviously. The last question was, who would you like to see, or who would you like to hear on Seminary Dropout? Some people you'd like for me to interview. A lot of those were people that I've approached. I don't want to disclose who I've approached and been turned down by, because I don't want it to, they don't owe me an interview, and I don't want it to come off as, like I'm shaming them or something. So I hope you know that it's not that you're not being heard. A lot of times it's, I have approached this person, either they said no or I haven't heard back from them. And so, yeah, please know that I am listening when you give those suggestions. All right. And some of them we'll see. Will probably be guests in the future. Okay. So there it is. That was a survey. I learned so much. Thank you all for filling that out. I greatly appreciate it. I'm ready to get straight to this interview because I have a really good one for you today. My guests are C. Christopher Smith and John Pattison. C. Christopher Smith is editor of the Englewood Review of Books and a member of the Englewood Christian Church community on the urban Near East Side of Indianapolis. John Pattison is managing editor of Conspire magazine. Previously, he served as deputy editor of the Burnside Writers Collective. A member of the National Book Critics Circle, he is a co-author of Besides the Bible. Chris Smith and John Pattison, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks, Shane, for having us.
Well,
yeah, thank you.
We're here to talk about your new book that you wrote collectively, Slow Church, Cultivating Community in the Patient Way of This. I'm curious about the genesis of this book, where the idea came from, and how it came about.
So we were, I think it's accurate to say that Chris and I were both sort of on our own slow church journeys before we had language for that. I was actually writing a different book, and a book on gluttony. A publisher was interested in seeing a proposal for that book, including a sample chapter or two. And it was when I was researching the fast food industry and conversely the slow food movement that I realized that there were a lot of principles of the slow food movement and some of the other slow movements that really appealed to me, and that I actually found myself wishing I could find in the church. I contacted the publisher and I said, I think that there's something around the area of slow church that I'd like to write about first. Would you be interested in seeing a book proposal on that? And they said, oh yeah, that's actually a way better idea. Oh, we definitely want to do that. But I also realized that that my wife and I and my church was very early in its journey into what I thought would be part of slow church, and I just knew that I needed to collaborate with somebody who was further along down the road, and could help me with some of the language. And I immediately thought of Chris and Inglewood Church, his church in inner city Indianapolis, and asked Chris if he wanted to collaborate, and he was really excited about it, and it was just one of the best decisions I've ever made, because he brought, just so much to the project.
Chris, what was it that what road were you farther down that made John think that you might be a good partner in this?
Well, we've been on a journey here at Englewood for the last 25 or 30 years of really trying to figure out what it means to be a congregation, to be, as the language that we use is, a manifestation of the body of Christ in this particular place. And just trying to figure out what it means to be a church here in an urban environment, and what it means to share life together with one another and with our neighbors. So that's kind of the journey that we've been on. And Slow Church was just provided some of the language. It actually, when John brought the idea to me, it wasn't the first time that I had heard this language. Our church has been involved with the Ecclesia Project for a number of years. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But actually, probably about 2005 or so, there was a conference on kind of theologically engaging Wendell Berry's work. And I believe that was the first time that I heard the term slow church used. But I kind of forgot about that almost until John brought it back up. And it just seemed like really sort of fruitful language and images to describe kind of the journey, to put some language on the journey that we've been on. We have some local ways of talking about it, but kind of didn't have particularly great sorts of ways of talking with others in other places about it. And this sort of language and imagery just seemed really helpful.
Well, the book is kind of if I can put it this way, it's kind of a correction of some things that went off the track or as a product of the church growth movement that we've probably all lived most of our lives through. You give, in the book, you give some kind of history. And one of the things I found fascinating was how you both talked about kind of the father of the church growth movement, who was Donald McGavran. And I had never heard of McGavran, but it was very fascinating. And in some things that he did and taught were some good things that later went awry. Some of the things that he taught were just right out of the box kind of harmful inadvertently. He was just a guy that was seeing the church and missions overseas being ineffective and trying to find out a way to correct that. Is that fair?
I think that's fair.
So what are some things that that today, people who are familiar with church growth concepts and things like that could recognize that came out of McGavran?
Well, I think that there are a couple things come to mind. I think that, and we do talk about this in the book, but one of the key values, or if it's not a value, it's something that makes everything else possible, is the reliance on homogeneity. That was a big part. McGavran, he talked about people movements, and one of his key theories was the homogeneous unit principle, and he was saying that the people liked to like to become Christians. They like to be saved without having to cross some of the tricky barriers of class and race and language. And so the way that he talked about it was like, how do we get people saved sort of in ways that are sort of most comfortable for them, without having to cross some of those barriers. And in one of his proteges, a guy named C. Peter Wagner actually came right out and said that segregation is a desired end for the sake of the gospel. But what we talked about in Slow Church is that the vision that we get of the church in the New Testament is not homogeneity. It's reconciled diversity, as one of the key hallmarks of the kingdom. And you see some of this still in the church growth philosophy in some of the target marketing and its heavy reliance on demographics and reaching out to certain kinds of people, and so that's one example of the ways in which McGavran's principles are still being used. There's also a real heavy approach on countable people, and this was a big part of McDonaldization in general, a focus on calculability. And so, because the focus is on people that is on results that you can count, there's just a strong temptation to go about reaching those people in sort of the most efficient way possible. Chris, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's a pretty good overview of kind of the ways that which the church growth movement has been manifested.
And so I think that, in McGavran's defense, he was coming from this world where, missionaries were going to indigenous tribes and making them wear clothes, and they were doing things that they were just westernizing these people. And so he kind of saw the fault in that. But unfortunately, he and the people who followed after him went to homogeneity. We don't inflict their culture on them. In fact, we don't blend cultures at all. We just let them be segregated, and we're segregated.
And I think that is actually one of the ironies of McGavran and the church growth movement is McGavran was really critical of mission stations, the mission station approach to foreign missions, which is where white missionaries would move into an area and they would set up maybe a hospital or a school or an orphanage, and then the people that they were trying to reach would have to come out of the village, sort of this white enclave, this I guess relic of colonization, in order to be served. And McGavran was really critical of that. And what I find ironic about that is that a lot of the churches that identify most strongly with church growth, I think, have that perspective of come out from the city, to the suburbs, to this place where you will be safe. And I think that a lot of the members really feel a lot of pressure to conform to a certain model of Christianity. And I don't think that's. I think that's something that McGavran was very critical of when he saw it in the foreign mission field.
One of the things that you both use to kind of frame the entire book is what's known as the McDonaldization. And you play off George Ritzer's. He gave 4 characteristics of McDonaldization, and they were efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control. And you guys have seen kind of how, and like I said, the entire book is framed in a way that shows how those things have kind of creeped into our churches via the church growth movement. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there may be many factors. I think the church growth movement is certainly a key one, but I wouldn't say necessarily that they've all just kind of come in through the church growth movement. I think the ways, part of what's really important for us in talking about slow church is the nature of places and how and taking the fact that our churches are in places, taking them very seriously. And I'm not sure that, there may be ways in which the church growth movement has contributed to our sort of placelessness as churches, but I have a feeling that it goes back a lot further than that.
Sure. Yeah. So let's take, for instance, the characterization of calculability. In what way has the church bought into that?
Well, I mean, when Richard talked about calculability, he was talking primarily about a desire for quantifiable results.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think a lot of the ways in which that's manifested in church growth movement type churches and and even ones that aren't necessarily, is just the strong emphasis on measuring the success of a church in terms of quantities, in terms of baptisms, in terms of people joining the church, in terms of the size of the congregation, in terms of the offering and the offering plate. And while metrics may be helpful in some situations, I think we've come to rely too much on the quantities and a lot less on the quality of our life together. And that's kind of the first part of the book that we kind of look at is talking about ethics. And when we talk about ethics, we mean preferring to focus on the quality of our life together rather than on the sorts of quantities that are really tempting for us to define our life together by.
And the logic behind that calculability that came into the church was Jesus said, go make disciples. Disciples are people. You can count those people. This is how we discern whether or not we're doing what God wants us to do, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that, a lot of the things, and this is one of the themes that kind of runs through the book, is that, and I think this is probably true for a lot of McGavern stuff as well, it was started from a very good intent, as you kind of alluded to there, Shane, but it somewhere along the line got off course and really, because I think of some of the sorts of power, McDonaldization, efficiency, predictability, and all those sorts of things, that the appearances, the numbers, came to mean more than actually what they were representing, the actual substance of transformed lives.
Yeah, and I think I can remember back when I was a church planter, the way that the association that we were part of, the way that they gauged our success was by the number of baptism. But that doesn't always, like you said, it doesn't give a good or a full picture of, maybe what is actually going on. And there are a lot of other things going on in the life of a church besides the number of those things.
Oh, absolutely. We were Englewood, the church that I'm a part of here in Indianapolis, was a very large church in the late 60s and early 70s, probably getting up about as high as maybe 3,000 members. But one of the interesting things, if you kind of look back at some of the records from that time, there was probably never more than half of that number here on any given Sunday. And some of the people that are still around that were around during that time were saying that people were kind of going out the back door as fast as they were coming in and being baptized. So yeah, all that to say that that just that sort of number isn't necessarily a good indication of the health of a congregation.
You've framed the book in this kind of idea of a three-course meal, and the first course being ethics, second ecology, and the last one economy. So what are those? How do those words relate to the life of the church? What are you describing there?
Well, we split it up that way because we believe that slow church is it tries to describe a holistic way of being together as the church. And so when we talk about the ethics of slow church, as Chris mentioned earlier, we're talking about the quality of our life together, the standard really being faithfulness. When we talk about the ecology of slow church, we're talking about how we believe that God has desires cooperation with us, but that happens sort of within the larger story of God's reconciling work in the world. And then in the economy section, it's simply God's abundant provision for God's reconciling work. And then those three things come together in the final chapter that we describe, that we call church as dinner table conversation. And we were very intentional of the language that we chose. We chose to talk about slow church, not slow Christianity or slow faith or slow spirituality, because we really do think that we think that the church is important. We love the church, and we think that God, from the beginning, God has been calling out a peculiar people that can embody God's reconciling work in the world. Not sure. Am I answering the question? Is that where you wanted to go with it? Okay, cool.
Yeah, definitely.
It's kind of an overview of the 3 parts of the book.
Right. That's perfect. So I think I want to kind of get at the heart of the book. What are some real world things that someone might see if they go to a church who is practicing these principles in slow church versus maybe a church that's embedded in this kind of church growth mentality?
Well, one of the key practices that we talk about throughout the book is the practice of conversation. And I think I want Chris to address this a little bit more, but the reason why I bring that up is because conversation takes time and it takes presence. And I think that all too often, fast church, for lack of a better catch-all phrase or whatever, doesn't take the time that is necessary for people really to be able to be together and learn how to talk well with each other. It takes the sort of intimacy and the and a commitment to rootedness that I think are all too rare. So maybe if Chris wouldn't mind talking a little bit about Inglewood's conversational practice, which has been an inspiration to my church in Silverton.
Sure, yeah, John, I'd be glad to do that. But maybe just one other thought first, too, and maybe this is putting it a little bit oversimplistically, but I think a lot of the sorts of things that we're reacting against in the book are ultimately just shortcuts to or shortcuts around discernment and conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Authoritarian leadership, for instance, is a shortcut around discernment of the body. Programs kind of imported from elsewhere are kind of shortcuts around discernment of the body. Of not that it's always necessarily a bad thing to use those, but kind of consistent reliance on programs that are brought in from elsewhere is a shortcut around kind of discerning the sorts of gifts that God has given us. So, I mean, I just want to kind of throw that into the mix as well. But our practice of conversation here at Englewood started probably about 17 or 18 years ago. Like a lot of evangelical churches at that time, we had a Sunday evening service that was a light version of the Sunday morning service. And also, like many evangelical churches at that time, attendance and interest in this evening service was waning. Participation was waning. But we didn't want to give up being together on Sunday nights, but we knew that we just was going to be pointless to kind of continue going in that same direction that we had been. So we just circled up chairs in one of our multi-purpose rooms and started to have a conversation together. And just I won't go into all the details of our history right now, but suffice it to say that we were a very fragmented congregation. We had folks that were kind of interested in more charismatic expressions, some very sort of dyed-in-the-wool Christian church people, some kind of maybe this is too derogatory, but kind of flavor of the moment evangelicals. What's the latest program, etc. So anyway, we were pretty fragmented, and so you can imagine as we tried to come together and talk together, things were really, really volatile. And actually, the question that we started with, which was a question that had come from somewhere else in our life together, whether as a result of a sermon or a Sunday school class or something, it was something that was already on people's minds. But they started with the question of what is the gospel, and it was just really, really volatile. People coming from all these different places on the sort of theological map and trying to discuss that question together. And I mean, I'm told that people were yelling at each other. Some people left the Sunday night conversation altogether. Some people left the church as a result of it, and it was just really ugly. And we just kind of reflected the larger Western culture inability to have civil and public conversations together. But we were really stubborn enough that we just continued in this practice of conversation week after week after week. We moved on to other questions that were kind of fundamental to our faith and life together, questions about what is the church and what is Scripture and how do we read Scripture and what is God doing in the world, and I mean all those sort of basic theological questions. And we just kind of continued to work at those through conversation over year after year after year. And what we found over time was that we weren't kind of all being magically transformed to think exactly the same way. But what we found as we continued in conversation was that we began to trust each other, to be able to even to work together, even when we didn't always agree on what should be done or how it should be done. But we were able to build up trust because we were with one another in conversation. We began to understand a little bit about where each of us was coming from, and to trust one another out of that sort of knowledge of one another. And so my wife, I was at the Wild Goose Festival last weekend, and I told this story, or this part of the story, and I had a couple of people come up to me afterwards and say that this was really helpful. But my wife and I came into the conversation probably about 8 years after it had started, so about 10 years ago. And I had I had been going to the Sunday night conversations for a few weeks before my wife was able to participate. And when she finally was able to participate in the Sunday night conversation, she kind of took me aside after the first conversation that she'd been a part of. And she said, "These people don't even like each other." And I mean, and this was, 7 or 8 years into the conversation. And it was, I mean, the sarcasm was really kind of what was, she was addressing there, in the ways in which we talk together. I think over the last decade, we've maybe toned that down a little bit and starting to learn a little bit more healthy ways of talking together. But yeah, and conversation has kind of overflowed our Sunday night time, and has really become a way for us to be together, to make decisions, to discern the shape of our life together, and as we've been brought into some pretty substantial conversations with our neighbors about the shape and future of our neighborhood. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really been transformative for us as a congregation, and I am really hopeful that it can be transformative for other congregations as well. And I think also, just one last thought, that I think that conversation is the way in which we kind of move into the ethics, ecology, and economy of slow church that we describe in the book. That's kind of the direction that we want to go, those kind of 3 E's. But conversation is the way in which we move forward in ways that are attentive to all the gifts that God has given us in our congregation, in our neighborhoods, and attentive to what God is doing in the world around us. And it's in conversation that we discern a way forward within all those sorts of particularities in our local church communities.
It sounds like a lot of what you're saying is that, you came together and you come together and you discuss these things, and you don't necessarily walk away agreeing, but you walk away able to live with each other in those differences, and choosing to live with each other in those differences.
Yeah, over time, that's the effect. Sometimes on a particular Sunday night, you may walk away pretty frustrated. But I mean, just the sort of stability of kind of continuing in that practice over time. Yeah, I think that is the basic gist of our experience.
But I think that speaks more powerfully to the idea of slow church, because, today for most people, if they walk away from one gathering at their church, angry or hurt or, something like that, well, they're just done. Like they're just going to walk away and find another church down the street that agrees with what they think. But to be able to have that moment where you're hurt, you're angry, you're disagreeing, you don't like how something went down, but that doesn't mean that I'm not coming back for the next gathering we have. That's a pretty powerful and countercultural thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, been our experience. I mean, we really, do believe that, like John kind of alluded to earlier, that what God is doing in the world is gathering a people, and that we try to embody a commitment to one another that runs deeper than just than our feelings on any particular given day. I mean, obviously, we need to be attentive. I mean, our feelings are part of our experiences and our lives, so we do need to be attentive to those sorts of things. But to not really allow that to kind of break the fundamental reality of the community that God is building and gathering in this place.
I feel like, if I could have a proxy conversation between, you guys and, proponents of fast church, I think a lot of what you are talking about And, for instance, using what we're on right now, talking about the church getting together and talking about these issues that we could disagree on, I think the argument from a fast church proponent would be, hey, that's really messy and we don't know where the outcome could be. Whereas if a pastor or someone in authority says, hey, here's what I believe this to be, and now believe it, that's a lot messier. Your version is a lot messier. And I feel like kind of what you're saying and kind of if I could oversimplify the entire book is, yes, it is a lot messier. It takes a lot more time, a lot more work, but it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, I think that's right about on spot. John?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I hope that that's what people are taking away from it, because I think it's a pretty good summation of what we're hoping people feel affirmed in after reading the book.
And as well, it seems like a lot closer to what the church is supposed to be. I mean, even if hypothetically we found something that quote unquote worked better, if it wasn't what the church was supposed to be, then that wouldn't really matter. It wouldn't be better. You both talk about, and a lot of the book seems to be built on this idea of counteracting the mentality of one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And you even use the example of Willow Creek, and Willow Creek has just become famous in the evangelical world for its growth and its methods of growth. And then we've seen the kickback from that in recent years, and even Willow Creek has owned up to a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But we try to emulate what they did that worked for the most part, worked very well for them. But that's a church in Chicago in a very specific set of circumstances. And, when we try to take that to whatever our context might be, whether it's, semi-rural Oregon or Indianapolis or those kind of places, it's not the same. However well it worked for them, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for us in our context.
Mm-hmm. And I think go ahead, Chris.
Oh, and also to throw in the mix too, that, part of our emphasis on kind of sort of contextual ministry, for lack of a better word, really is attentiveness to, yes, place is one important part of it, and the sorts of dynamics that unfold in our particular places, but also people are really important, and the sorts of gifts that God has gathered in the people within a local congregation. So we do daycare here at Englewood. We do housing. We do bookstore stuff. We do bookkeeping. But all of these sorts of initiatives that are kind of rooted in who we are as the church have come out of the gifts and skills that people have. And on one hand, I think that's one of the things that we're arguing for is a broadening understanding of Christian vocation, that churches can and should be about more than just the Sunday morning service, but also that part of really a local contextual approaches to church really depends on, even beyond the sorts of kind of socio-demographic built environment sorts of things. It just depends on the people and the gifts that God has provided in those people.
How does a church that has kind of been doing things the fast church way and then sees there's something better, how do they go from that mentality of let's try out this program, let's do this thing this other church is doing? How do they go from that mentality to the, putting their ear to the ground, so to speak, mentality?
Mm-hmm. There's a theologian who's been really influential for both Chris and for me, a theologian named Phil Kennison, and he spoke at the Slow Church conference that we held recently in Indianapolis, and I really appreciated his response to a question very similar to this one, which was, he said, think about the how and the why of what you're already doing as a church. Like, for example, are we gathering together? Are we singing with each other? Are we studying scripture together? Are we meeting on Sunday mornings together in order to get something done because we want to feel productive, or is there something deeper there? And he talks a lot about presence with God, presence with each other. And so I think that something really valuable can come when churches just stop and think about why they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing what they're doing, and how some of these practices can be reoriented away from productivity and frenzied productivity, the need to get something done, and toward deep presence. So I really appreciated that response, and I've been thinking about that a lot.
And if I could add one more thing to that, and it's actually very much a parallel to what you were saying, John. I absolutely agree with what you said. But also our friend, I was having some conversations over the last week with our friend Tim Sorens, who's one of the co-authors of the book that just recently came out called The New Parish.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they advocate in that book, which I think is excellent, is almost kind of very similar to what John was talking about, but also being attentive to our places. And I mean, and I'm thinking about what sorts of things do we do, and how can we do them more closely, in more close connection with the places that we live, or that we are together as the church. So I mean, things like sports or play. How can we enter into, I mean, maybe it's starting sports leagues, maybe it's having a bunch of our people participate in a given sports league that's going on in the neighborhood, or eating out or getting coffee. I mean, how can we do that with other people from our church or from our neighborhood in a particular place that is a sort of third place or significant place in our neighborhoods. So again, it's kind of the same idea that John was saying of, I mean, what are we already doing, and how can we do that in ways that are more attentive to the places that we exist within. So, I mean, I think that's another step. And also, kind of along those lines, I mean, I think one of the churches, and when we get the question asked, we get this a sort of similar sort of question to what you just asked, Shane, ask of us a number of times over the last few weeks as we've been talking about the book. But one of the examples that I think has been really helpful for me is the stories that Randy Frazee tells of the church that he was involved with, which was a very large kind of megachurch sort of thing, but they really started to be engaged in their neighborhoods and encourage their members that lived in close proximity to one another to be engaged in their schools and other things that were going on in their neighborhoods. And I think that's a really sort of helpful direction to begin to move when we're talking about slow church. Of really, I mean, even if you are a big church, figure out where your members live and help them to connect with one another and encourage them to understand why it's beneficial for them and for their neighbors to be connected and to find ways to interact together on more than just kind of a Sunday morning service or a small group meeting once a week, but to engage one another in more holistic ways, and to be able to engage a specific set of neighbors that are in whatever neighborhood that group of people might be.
And I think that because the ultimate standard we believe is faithfulness or is that presence, I think if a church was to say, we're going to start implementing these 3 or 4 slow church practices, and they're sort of doing it on top of what they're already doing, I think that actually can short circuit presence, because you're just becoming a busier church. But if you can pivot, like as Chris was saying, pivot what you're already doing toward faithful presence, toward deep presence with, in your neighborhood with your neighbors. You're not adding another program or yet another thing that you have to add to your already busy schedule. And so I guess I bring that all up to say that ultimately slow church is subject to the same standards as fast church, and also probably subject to a lot of the same temptations. And so there needs to be that ultimate standard that exists outside of fast church or slow church.
Which you're saying is faithfulness.
Well, yeah, we think that faithfulness is the ultimate standard of our life together.
So it sounds like you're saying that even the principles of slow church could be turned into another program if we're not careful.
Oh, absolutely.
I absolutely believe that.
I think I maybe alluded to this before, but I think if people don't take anything else away from the book, that really, it matters not only what we believe we were calling to do, that God is calling us to do. It also matters how we do that, and I think that's kind of speaks to what you just summarized, Shane.
I'm curious what you guys would say to someone like me who is in between churches right now and I'm looking for one. And most of the book is written within a context of for people who are inside the church and changing it from within. But what kind of advice you would have for someone like me who's in my position of starting from scratch somewhere else?
Well, without knowing you very well or knowing your neighborhood very well, actually what comes to mind is a story that's told about Eugene Peterson.
Yeah.
He was someone asked him like what's the one thing that people could do that would rejuvenate or revolutionize the American church? And Eugene Peterson said, go to the church that is closest to your house, stay there and like it. So that may not work for everyone, but I really think that proximity to your church or to people who are part of your church, I think is really important for everything that we're talking about.
Yeah. The community, sometimes it can trump, homogenous theology to a fine tip point.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, and even if there's not even if you are uncomfortable or someone going into a church is uncomfortable, there may be a sort of witness that you bring, even if you're coming from maybe a little bit different sort of theological perspective or different sort of experience. That it may not work this way, but it may be a gift to that congregation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, it's part of the preference that we have for reconciled diversity rather than sort of always mandating homogeneity.
For sure. Well, Chris and John, thanks so much for joining me. I hope I did the book justice and as much as I could in a 45-minute interview. Is there something pressing that we might have missed?
I think you did a great job. Oh,
no, you did a wonderful job.
I
just wanted to throw one more thing into the mix before we close. And I think that the image that we want to leave people with at the end of the book, kind of with the final chapter of the book, is reimagining church's dinner table conversation. We've talked a lot about the conversation part of that, but I also would just kind of emphasize the place of creating spaces for us to eat together, and the sort of sharing. The New Testament word koinonia is often kind of watered down when we translate it into English as fellowship, but the sorts of sharing that happens around eating a meal together. It is, as Wendell Berry emphasized, eating is an economic act. It is real life and real sustenance that's being shared around the table. And to really be attentive to that and to be attentive to the sort of economic questions that arise around having a meal together, about where's the food going to come from, who's going to grow it, who's going to prepare it, who's going to clean up afterwards. All of those sorts of questions, again, lead us into a deeper sort of engagement with one another, and I believe with the reconciling work that God intends to do in the world.
That's great. Well, thank you guys so much. And as always, for listeners, the links to the book and to the website will be on the show notes. So go check it out. Chris and John, thanks so much for joining me.
Shane, thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I woke up this morning hoping you'd be there next to me.
Friends, remember, you can find links to everything that we mentioned on the show on the show notes for this episode. And you can find that at shaneblackshear.com/slowchurch. It'll all be there, everything you could want to find. All right. Other than that, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. I would be very grateful for that. This music that you're listening to right now is provided by DL Rossi. Go check him out on iTunes and online, DL Rossi. And I think that does it for another week of Seminary Dropout. We'll see you next time.